and solve puzzles. And then also how that can apply to VR development, which is in a similar way about designing for people inhabiting a space.
Okay. So you have actually made some escape the room games for people. Can you talk about your experiences making those?
Sure. The first one that I worked on is here in Portland, Oregon, where I live. And I worked on that with a bunch of friends of ours. And it was the first one here in our city and among the first in our region, even in the Pacific Northwest. So we sort of were making stuff up as we went along. Not since that was 2 years ago, there's been a lot of stuff that's changed since then. I've also done a bunch that were for freelance clients, including one for Resident Evil that was recently in Los Angeles with Capcom and I Am 8-Bit.
Oh, that's awesome. So I really like Resident Evil. Like I actually in my coworkers and I were just watching a clip from the original Resident Evil where there were the lasers in that room, and they just chopped everybody up. Is that what your escape the room was like?
Definitely, yes, exactly.
Was definitely like that. Okay. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about what was involved there and how you tried to evoke, the Resident Evil experience?
Sure. And I'll be a little bit vague because a version of this room will appear again. So I'll try and avoid spoilers.
Okay.
But for the one in LA, you entered into the mansion, and then you passed through to the police department, and then to an underground lab, and then you circled back around to a sort of Southern Gothic bayou living room sort of thing. So you're actually passing through multiple different games, sort of in theory. But to make them make sense as like a story that you as a player are inhabiting, I designed it so that you're actually participating in an Umbrella Corporation simulation. So it's like one of the things that I like to do is, sort of you have to have a reason why you're there, right? You have to have a reason that you're solving puzzles. Like it's not enough to just sort of put you in a room and be like, go. You just, even that little bit of reality, like gives your brain something to hook onto. So that's just always in the background while you're working. So in this one, it was like you're assessing your skills, and that's why there's puzzles hidden there.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm playing some of the new Resident Evil, and I feel like there's like the motivation to solve puzzles. There's not really like a real, it's like what you described, the puzzles are just kind of there. Some of them, when you're designing a puzzle in an escape the room game or in like a VR game, how do you try I guess the main motivation is to get out, but from a narrative standpoint, how do you incorporate that?
Right. Well, the degree to which that actually is like woven in sort of depends on the need of the room, right? I did one over the summer for a major sneaker company. So it was like very much focused on like teamwork and physical action and sort of sports and stuff. So there wasn't necessarily a narrative, but I needed to design the behavior to be sort of like bringing people together and encouraging teamwork and the sort of like the brand principles. When it is something that's really narrative, the most beautifully designed puzzle is going to be sort of a hybrid. It's going to be diegetic, right? Like the object comes from the world that it's set in. It should tell you something about itself. Like in its design, it should indicate how it's going to be solved. And then like also hopefully something about it is propelling you forward in the narrative.
So how do you, when you go into a project like that, how do you design, like what are you considering in terms of the design space? Like how do you balance the difficulty? Like how do you get a sense of how hard a puzzle should be or how many puzzles there should be in a given room? That kind of thing. Like how do you approach that as the designer?
Right. So I tend to design hour-long ones that are for like roughly 8 people. So there's just a certain amount of activity that you want to be having going on at one time. You want people to be able to sort of run around, grab up a whole bunch of stuff, figure out, well, this needs to go over here and this might be over there, and then split up and work on their own thing, maybe coming together a couple more times. So often that will be like around 10 to 12 puzzles. maybe a little more and maybe a little less. But really, the way that that all plays out is in playtesting. I'll design. Oh, sorry.
I mean, please go ahead and finish your thought. After that, I'd love to know how exactly you playtest something like this.
Yeah, well, that's that's what I'm going to explain. Like you design everything on paper, basically, to the best of your ability, and after a while, you get a sense of like the sort of puzzles that are going to be fun and that'll be interesting, and that'll be challenging but not impossible to solve. But then, like by far the largest phase of this should be playtesting, where you put stuff in front of people and then watch them fail to solve things, and it's like their failure is never their own fault. It's never because they can't do it or because they're stupid or anything like that. It's because you as a designer have failed to help them solve it in the design, or by giving them the appropriate amount of information, or if the design is just bad. So like actually watching people fail to solve your thing teaches you how to make that thing better. So it's by far the most important part.
So when you're talking about this, it sounds, unsurprisingly, a lot like digital video game design.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
So, and when you're, what VR projects are you working on right now?
Nothing that's been announced yet, so that I can't really talk about them yet.
But yeah, but the process, it sounds like one informs the other. Are there, is it practically the same, except one's physical and one's digital, or are there distinct differences when you're approaching problems in these two physical versus digital spaces?
For me, the most interesting stuff about VR is going to be how there's so much that you can do in it that is just physically impossible in the real world. One of the major limitations of building a real world thing, for example, is like stuff breaks, or like there's only so many ways to lock something shut, with a bolt or a padlock or whatever it's going to be. That's something that obviously in VR is not a problem, right? You can design a lock that's like you press like a series of buttons and you wave your hands around and then it magically opens. So the design freedom is like much, much greater. For me, it's fundamentally rooted in the sense of awareness of the physical body that is going to be performing that stuff. So that's for me where the crossover is. Like it's always, you can't forget that it's an actual person with a physical body in a real space who's going to become tired after a while. Or, if you're asking them to wave their arms around a lot, like that's actually really exhausting.
Yeah.
And in a lot of games, they're being designed for length, right? You want to like feel like you're getting your money's worth. But like if it's something where you're having somebody stand in a room, there's like an actual limitation to just the body's capability of handling that.
Yeah, you mentioned at least your talk description mentions the nature of play as it relates to brain architecture. And you talk about like there's cognition, human psychology. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of designing these escape room games?
Sure. It's related to this thing of like the awareness that a physical person is engaging in this stuff. But there's a lot of neuroscience that actually goes into choosing what motions you're going to have somebody use in that space, or in VR design, like the earliest stuff that we've seen goes for basically like brain feelings, right? It's like claustrophobia or vertigo, or in the narrative stuff, like you're seeing a lot of horror and jump scares, that kind of thing. And that's just like, it's very easy to design for primal reactions, basically. Things like fear and curiosity and nervousness about the dark are sort of the brain operating like very instinctively. So a lot of the earliest VR stuff that I've seen has sort of been touching on that. And that it's like there's so much potential there. There aren't even really vocabulary words to describe what that is. So that's sort of like the cognitive science comes into play there, because there's lots of studies of brain behavior. Like as an example, you know the gorilla concentration test. Have you seen that video before?
I don't think that I have. I think I would have remembered it.
This is this is a spoiler if you ever encounter it, because once you sort
Yeah.
of know the trick, like it's you won't be able to not see it.
Yeah.
But it's a video of people playing basketball and passing a ball around, and the text on the screen asks you to count, how many passes or whatever. In the midst of it is a person in a gorilla costume who walks across the screen. But you have been concentrating so hard on the basketball players and on the counting that you didn't even notice the gorilla most of the time. And it's just, that's just the brain's way of like regulating information that's going in. You can't, for survival reasons, obviously, like pay attention to lots and lots of stuff, especially when your focus has been directed so specifically. So that's something to play with in design, like in VR. You don't have to include every detail. And that's also, I mean, that comes into like escape rooms and physical stuff that's happening in there. Like you don't have to provide every detail because people's imaginations will fill in the blanks, basically, especially if you're speaking to archetypal stuff, the fear kinds of responses, that sort of thing. Like you don't have to say there's something scary in the next room. You don't have to show a picture of it. You just like make a scratching noise on a door and people sort of know what that means.
Yeah, I get that sometimes. That's usually my dog. It's funny that kind of plays into some stuff that I've read from Thomas Grip from Frictional, and he's describing horror games, and he calls it mental modeling. I don't know if that's like a broad psychological term or what, but it's just, and that's what those, like his kinds of games really take advantage of. There's really not much, quote unquote, going on in a lot of his games, but you're modeling it and you're just creating like this fear and tension in yourself. And yeah, it's just, I can just feel my brain, I kind of let myself go when I do like horror games are just a good example of that thing. I just kind of let my brain go crazy, just making stuff up, and I get really freaked out by all that.
Are there any like non-terrifying examples of that? Like, are there any good, happy, warm, fuzzy feeling examples of that? I'm not into. I have to confess, I've never done an escape room puzzle game. Just the idea of being locked in a room for an hour, even though you can get out at the end, is too freaky for me.
Right. No, that's totally. I don't like horror ones either, and nothing that I design is scary, really. Like, there's never any murders or anything. Just because I think like that's just really easy to go for that and to try and tell that story. So it's actually like more challenging, more interesting to try and design something that's like compelling without there being a dead body involved.
I would love to like dig into like, because you have, we haven't dug into it too much yet, but you have a history of designing interactive, I would say, experiences, not just games. I mean, I know you've done work in like digital games as well, interactive fiction and stuff, but you've also done come out and play stuff, like big crowd games. You've done, all these escape the room things, and you have a wide CV, I might say. So like have you tried to make games that are not tapping into primal responses, and like how has it gone?
Yes, I mean that's something that I've come to as I've gotten older and like more interested in it. For me, it generally comes down to people's behavior, right? Like in field game, street game kind of design. For those, I usually start with like an image of what I want people to be doing. I don't necessarily know what that game is going to be in the end, but if I can visualize the fun action that is happening, like the behavior sort of emerges to make the game part of that. But that's something that people who work in that field talk about a lot. Like if you put a huge stack of balls in a room and put people in there, they're going to make a game from that. You know what I mean? In escape rooms, especially, like they're not easy to make. Yeah. But it's also not hard to put furniture in a room and to throw a bunch of puzzles on top of that, right? even if rooms are not sort of thoughtfully designed, if they don't have the sort of integrated narrative stuff that like is my particular area of interest, they're still going to be fun because you're there with your friends. You know, you're having a good time. Like your heart is racing because the timer is going. Like you're going to make your own fun from that.
Yeah.
So all the stuff that I work on sort of, I think, has that in common.
Just noting real quick, some people in chat are talking about the gorilla video, and let's see. Rolfie657 says, "Yeah, I won't lie, I didn't see the gorilla." And Yodam H says, "Yeah, I didn't see the gorilla the first time either." So confirmed.
Yeah.
Suaro says, "Yo, I didn't see that gorilla the first time either."
I literally have not seen the gorilla, but only because I haven't seen the video. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was Robin Haneke's talk at VRDC, and you mentioned a while ago the way that you interact physically with objects and stuff. And she was talking about developing her next game for VR. And she made some really interesting points. For example, there's the grip itself on the Vive controller is like an aggressive grip that's like pulling a trigger or like grasping hard and punching, whereas the game that she's making is more like a pen, like you're holding it. I mean, more, she wants to convey more of that feeling, or just even she had the audience reaching up, and then it's just the feeling that it's just not something that game developers who make games for controllers have really traditionally thought about. Do you think of these considerations that are as subtle as, how it feels to move, to reach for something or look for something in these physical spaces and in VR?
Yes, definitely. I have a friend who speaks about this in VR communities. Her name is Jessica Outlaw. So if you happen to see her giving a talk near you, I highly recommend going to that. But this is something that we talk about a lot. Your physical gestures do affect your feelings towards something. So I think in the work that I'm doing in particular, I'm trying to prime people a lot of the time for what I want them to feel within that environment. And like one of the most basic examples of this is like pushing or pulling something away from you because of the muscle that you're using to do that action. Affects your feelings. Like if you're pushing something away, you feel negatively toward that thing. If it, it could be a chair that you're pushing, and then you're asked to respond to whatever the thing is. You'll feel more negatively versus feeling more positively had you pulled it towards you. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a major part of it. And a lot of our design is inspired by theater as well. Like you want people to feel a sense of transportation, right? So like in theater, you call it crossing the thresholds, where you sort of sink into that world. You feel as if you're in a new place. There's something happening to you in your brain. It's a willing suspension of disbelief. So in that sort of process of crossing the threshold, I think there's really specific stuff you need to do narratively to convey, like, you're no longer in the real world, you're in this game world. And part of that is like setting people up in using gestures or whatever the cognitive science stuff is going to be for your particular thing.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned kind of your main focus, your wheelhouse is the narrative, the environmental storytelling stuff. And of course, like what we've been seeing this show up in like flat screen games. I don't know what to call games anymore. There's like, but yeah, just like Gone Home and Proteus and things like that. That kind of bringing to surface this design that's involved in just like looking at something and that, or being somewhere, and you can, it kind of tells a story. Can you talk about your philosophy on environmental storytelling a bit?
Sure. It's something that happens all around us in such a fundamental way that it's almost difficult to explain why it matters and why it's so important. In an office environment, like there's a huge difference between cubicles under fluorescent lights versus like, something that's been designed to sort of like,
Mhm.
foster calmness, for example, in your home, even like the lighting level that you've chosen for a particular room makes a huge difference in your feelings and your mood. And so like, it's difficult to explain. Like, I think that it's essential. It's
Let's
something. Uh,
no, go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say, like, it's something that is so fundamental that you might not even notice that it's there, but you feel it subconsciously when it's not happening.
I want to ask Alex a question.
Okay, hit me.
Alex, are you ready to receive a question? Well, okay, can you look around your room right now and just act like you don't know, just like you're new to the room.
Mhm.
What is the environment? What story does the environment tell at this moment? Describe.
Well, right now, I think it tells the story of hope. It's sunny here for the first time in about a week and a half. It also tells a certain story of can-do-itness, because it's a converted closet that is now a tiny office. And yeah, it tells a story of the Bay Area because it's freezing, even though it's bright outside.
You didn't mention the tall Swede that is inside there also.
Is there a Swede in here with me? What do you what?
I don't remember where you're from.
There's a tall, somewhat confused Swedish Ukrainian American sitting here trying to convey a sort of interesting interview.
Yeah.
I want to hear the story of, Laura, how you got involved in all of this, because I don't have the first idea about how you go about becoming a freelance escape room designer.
You get trapped in a room, right? Were you trapped in a room and then it's like, hey, I can do this?
That was the first test. Yeah. It's an interesting story, I guess. I have always, since I was a kid, been interested in like mystery and detective stories. I actually was obsessed with this book called The Young Detective's Handbook. But like there's books like The 11th Hour, the sort of mystery book where stuff's like woven into the illustrations. And I've always really drawn to that kind of thing. But like thinking about it now, there were lots of books. Do you know the book The Jolly Postman? The kids book?
Can't say that I do.
There was a British book called
I remember
Postman Pat. Is that it?
It's not. It's got like envelopes as the pages, and you take letters out and you read, the little letters, the post letters.
That sounds great, though.
It's just like when I think of the things that I'm interested in now, I'm like, I've been interested in that stuff my entire life, starting with The Jolly Postman and The 11th Hour. But when I was in college, there was a thing happening called alternate reality games. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They were marketing exercises put on to promote stuff without ever actually directly speaking about the thing. And it was basically kind of like a treasure hunt that was played out online over a couple of months. So there were players and they would email with characters and they would solve puzzles that were embedded in websites and also in real world things. That part of it was inspired by the Michael Douglas movie, The Game, where he's like walking down the street and a payphone rings and it's like, it's for him. Right. So this idea of like the game could be in the real world is like very much a part of these sort of alternate reality game things. The first one ever was for the movie AI, and like there was all this code hidden in a movie poster.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can I share something with you?
Yeah.
Just between the three of us, four of us. Brian's here too.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a couple of years ago, I was freelancing for a different video game website, and I pitched a feature about the history of alternate reality games. And I found what I think is the earliest one, and it's actually before AI. It's for I don't remember the name of it. I could find it for you with 10 minutes of research, but they took the website offline because GamePro's not around anymore. But basically, the San Francisco Chronicle funded what is probably what I think is the actual first alternate reality game in like the late 90s. And it was I think it was after the game came out. The film, The Game, which by the way is playing at GDC movie night. So if you're going to GDC, come to movie night, watch The Game. Michael Douglas, it's great. But the Chronicle funded, it was like an arts project. And this is back when the internet was like all like hyperlinks and, like like cascading style sheets were yet to really be a thing. So they had this like ancient website with these like little clickable hyperlinks, and they had like real events taking place in San Francisco that were like leading people down this story path. And then like it crescendoed in this like meeting in a bar with like a fire breathing robot and like a mystery man or something. It was crazy.
That's
I'm gonna spend the next 5 minutes looking it up, but it's alternate reality games are great.
Yeah,
they're awesome.
A lot of people don't know this, but Gamasutra is a really long arc in itself.
That's right.
So, yeah, I guess we'll all find out how it ends. There was also the I Love Bees one is a famous one.
Yes.
Too. Yeah.
So that's actually the first one that I engaged with. Like I had heard about the AI stuff, but it was the I Love Bees thing where all of these like coordinates and dates and times had appeared on a site. And people eventually figured out that that was payphones that at that given date and time were going to ring. And I thought that was like the coolest thing I had ever heard of. So that was like actually what they call the rabbit hole, where you like first dive into the thing. Yeah.
Nice.
Sorry?
Oh no! I just wanted to sorry to interrupt, but just to while we're on the topic of it, well, actually, he's talking about, or they're talking about augmented reality stuff, not which is different. So Evanru from chat has a question. Any thoughts on using augmented reality elements in escape rooms? That's interesting, like putting projectors to move scenes on the walls, using cell phones to interact with puzzle elements, etc.
I think that it's super fun to do that kind of stuff. And like, obviously it opens up the possibilities of the types of puzzles that you can do and the sort of theming that you can have. I have learned my lesson over time, which is to have as the least amount of technology possible in the game, just because it breaks so often. And like, the risk of it breaking and taking somebody out of the experience, the higher that is, like the less inclined I am to put it in there. But I do use that stuff in there. In one of them, I've got a cell phone, it's just like a burner phone that you can get at like 7-Eleven, that you find a phone number later on, you dial it, you hear a voicemail, and like that's the code. And there's one that I have been working on that uses projection onto scrims to sort of give the appearance of floating images. So, they have their place when it's appropriate. I would just always personally build in some kind of contingency in case it breaks, so that people don't necessarily know that something has gone wrong.
Yeah.
And that's, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, that makes sense. It's a lot of moving parts, throwing it in there. I mean, has there been a situation in a finished Escape the Room game where maybe something that you didn't consider in play testing or didn't see in play testing happened, like the bug comes up and then you have to patch it?
Oh yes. So that's one of the other things about building something physically, and this is true for digital as well. People try and break stuff, right? Like, people want to explore all the way to the boundaries, the edges of the world, whatever it's going to be, because that's how you learn the mechanics of that system, right? Like, you have to test what's not going to work in order to learn like what you can actually use. But if there's something in an escape room that is breakable, people are going to break it. Like, people take light bulbs out of things, people will unplug stuff. In one of our play tests, one of our rooms has a typewriter in it, an actual working typewriter. The puzzle itself is, using the keys. But in the playtest, we didn't say don't touch the thing. So people took the ink ribbon out and were, unwinding it and like trying to read the things that had been typed on it previously. Their hands are covered in ink. And that's how we learned to tell people to not take the typewriter apart. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it sounds like when again, it sounds so much like when I talk to VR developers and they're talking about play testing. I was talking to Alex Schwartz at Alchemy about Job Simulator, and they're all about affordance
Yeah.
And that sounds like the typewriter thing sounds like an affordance issue because it's a typewriter. So I'm gonna. It just seems like affordance would be so difficult because I mean, in a physical space using real world objects, because I mean, if there's a chair there, I'm gonna pick up the cushion. I'm gonna look under that. I'll be the person getting the ink everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's very true. And that's down to the designer. Like if you don't care if people are trashing your stuff, then it's fine to just put in a bunch of stuff. In the ones that I design, every single thing in the room is going to be part of a puzzle or a clue. There's no like red herrings, there's no extra stuff that's meant to just like mess with you. And if it's a thing where we're, you know, if we don't want you to take out the light bulb, we'll tell you.
Yeah.
About like multiple solutions. There's a question in the chat from Yadam H asking whether you can talk about designing for multiple solves in a given escape room, especially in the context of VR. Do you think it's important to have multiple paths at all?
I know of rooms where you can crack stuff, and like if you, I generally feel that if you can solve something that's not like the actual, you know, sort of designed way of solving it, like you get that, like that solve belongs to you, because that's how it is in recreational puzzle hunt solving, right? Like if you can just guess the password to whatever the thing is rather than solving like the long thing that actually would like take you there through a puzzle, like you've earned it, right? It's a different kind of satisfying for the player.
It's like the Dark Souls of physical games, because like the rules are set to guide you towards one outcome, but if you can cheese it so that you can get out anyway, it counts.
Yes,
you didn't
exactly.
cheat. There is no cheating. I guess there probably is. Is there cheating at escape rooms? There probably is, right?
Breaking stuff to get at something, I think, would probably be the only cheat. And that I don't think is a valid solve. Like,
oh, you don't leave too many sledgehammers just in the escape room.
Right.
Yeah.
But generally, like, it's my job. Like, to me, the escape room is providing you with a specific designed experience. And part of that experience is giving you the puzzle, letting you scratch that itch and gain that sense of satisfaction. So if you feel like you've like bested the puzzle by like going around it, like that's cool, that's fine. And if that's deliberate, then that's okay. But to me, that's not satisfying. Like you don't feel like you've really worked for it and earned it. So I would do my best to make sure that that was not possible at all. And sometimes that's like making the padlock code too difficult to guess, like to randomly crack. You know, there's sort of like ways around it, because again, there's only so many ways to like lock something. You know, that it has to do with like gating of information sometimes. Like you've held back enough that there's no potential way for somebody to like get ahead of it. Yeah, physical barricades as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you're not a fan of the Motorhead school of escape room solutions. Yadam H wants to clarify, and just to be clear, like, do you think it's like a good idea to have multiple valid solutions, or have you ever seen that in escape room design this far?
I can think of maybe one or two specific puzzles within a room that may have that, but I would say generally no. And especially for me, in the first room that I designed with my friends, called Spark of Resistance, it's a sort of like East German dystopian Berlin Wall era kind of like propaganda office thing. Each puzzle that you solve is sort of like increasing your access to information within this propaganda office. It's bringing you closer to different encounters with a character. So to subvert those changes the story, basically. So they're like very specifically designed to give you a very specific experience. I think that could be cool, though.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Your perspective is because you know, in video game design, when you go back and look at the way people think about it, I think it's Warren Spector who said that, like, this was ages ago. He was really excited about the possibility of like rendering just a single build, like a single city block or a single building or even maybe a single room in incredibly high fidelity. Like you can pick up and move and touch everything and play with everything and talk to people and whatever, and that would give the designer this incredible playground in which to create experiences for the player, because they could to get into a room, they could go through a vent, or they could get the key from somebody, or pickpocket the key, or pick the lock, or knock the guy out. There's all these options, right? Whereas here in these escape rooms that you are designing, like it seems like to try and create a sandbox environment where the team can come up with one of 8 different solutions to get out, that in a way like dilutes the experience you're trying to create.
I mean, the limiting factor here is the time limit. You really only have the hour or the 45 minutes or however long. And that changes people's behavior, like harkening back to the attention experiment thing. Like, people don't notice lots and lots of things. We have a hint system that blares this alarm to draw your attention to a screen in this room, and people miss it. You're so in that flow state, you're so hyper focused that you just tune stuff out. So you kind of have to like account for that as well. Like, things can only be so difficult, so convoluted, so heavy in the cognitive load, because like people will just miss stuff.
Yeah, I've been wanting to ask you since we started talking about that RE branded.
Oh yeah.
It ties into this sort of, but I'm just going to throw it in anyway. Like, for those kind of escape rooms that you design that have to have some kind of like digital analog, with like, this is from this game franchise or movie or whatever, you must be compelled or incentivized to like fill them with like real world bric-a-brac that matches the virtual artifacts, right? So like, how do you source that? How do you go out and find like, okay, here's an umbrella logo on like a couch, or here's an umbrella branded, I don't know, a door. Like, how do you fill these escape rooms with very specific items that you only need for these escape rooms, and that's probably going to be it?
Right. Well, I mean, hopefully, and again, everything that you've chosen is so deliberately picked for that one thing that, it can't just be for any of them. There is like a very healthy community of Resident Evil fan maker stuff, especially on Etsy. I mean, part of this too is like, the entire room doesn't have to be like everything is umbrella. If you have selected just like a couple really key things that evoke that stuff, in the mansion room. And again, I won't get into like super specifics because it will be an actual spoiler should you go and do the version that's going to be out soon. There's one puzzle in there that's like directly inspired by a game puzzle. But I've changed it to actually make sense for that room, and also to sort of give it a sense of balance. So like, there's a mix of like physical things and things that you're looking at, and logic and math and sort of combinations of things. But yeah, I think like a few very specifically chosen elements that evoke something. So because again, like, we want people to be able to play this who have never experienced Resident Evil. Like, they don't actually know any of those references.
A reference like Master of Unlocking. That seems like there's just like this is prime material to use in an escape room.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, you have to kind of design it for both people.
Yeah. A general question that here, the word immersion. And that's mentioned in your talk description that's happening at GDC for people who are joining us midstream. Is that how I say it? Immersion, what is that? How do you define that?
For me specifically, it's the sense of transportation. It's not because, okay, so like in games, I don't necessarily want to be a character. I'm like an exploring type, right? Like, I want to solve all the puzzles. I want to like poke around. Like playing Shenmue, I want to open every drawer. I want to talk to every character. I want to collect every cassette tape. Sure. Like, making the choices as the character kind of, for me, gets in the way of that, right? So to me, it's like that sense of otherworldliness. something that I reference a lot in speaking about this stuff, the environmental design, but also like the experience design that you're trying to provide to somebody, is Sleep No More, the production of Macbeth in New York. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not, unfortunately.
I had a friend go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been 3 times and I would go again. But it's a production of Macbeth, and it's set in a sort of like noir 30s-ish sort of thing. But it takes place in a building. It's like 5 or 6 stories, and the entire building is the stage set. The play loops 3 times in an evening, and like there's no offstage. Every single character in it has a plot that takes them around this space, moving around through it, but things change in each of the loops. And you, as a visitor, are free to wander anywhere that you want. Sometimes characters will go through a door that locks behind them, and so, you're forced to sort of divert. But it truly is the most video game-like experience I've ever had in a real-life thing. And actually, sort of like speaking back to these ARGs, they offered an element of transportation as well, because it's that willing suspension of disbelief that you enter into. Those moments, like when you as a community are all on IRC and you're like really in the midst of like cracking a puzzle, and like your adrenaline is up and everybody is like feeling that same thing in that same moment. That's something, you're experiencing it in your body. It's very much based on your physical presence and your relationship with that community at that time. So like that ephemerality to me has always been really interesting and important. But like ARGs eventually died down. And so Sleep No More was the first thing I had experienced that gave me that same sort of like tug in the gut of excitement that ARGs had given me in the past. So for me, that's what it means.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about that, and then earlier you said that theater has influenced the way that you approach game design. Do you think of players who play your games as performers themselves, or what do you think of their role when you're designing?
Oh, definitely, yes. I mean, everybody needs to feel like they are participating, for one thing. But we designed in something that we wanted to we internally refer to them as like hero moments. There's a term in LARP, live action role play, called froth, which is like after the game has concluded and you're sitting there with your friends talking about what has just happened, and like, oh my gosh, wasn't it so cool? Like when you did that, and like somebody else did this other thing, which meant this. Like there's a collective myth making that is happening. That is like, that becomes your memory then of the experience. That's something that happens with Sleep No More as well, because you go, I should have said as well, like you're totally anonymous. You as a guest, you wear a mask and there's no speaking. So you separate from your friends and you each have your own separate experience. And then afterward, you get together in the bar or whatever, and you're like, oh my gosh, I saw this thing. And then somebody else may have had a completely separate experience from you. But it's in that conversation that's what your memory becomes, and that's the frothing. So we wanted that to be a part of it and sort of designed for it. It's funny because something that I see a lot after people come out of games is like everybody feels like they didn't contribute, right? Like maybe they solved one thing, but every single person is like, oh yeah, I didn't do anything. And I'm like, no, you got out of the room, and it requires participation from everybody, even if you weren't the one to sit and do a puzzle from start to finish. Like every single person has contributed. So like knowing that that's a feeling that people had, like we wanted to make sure there were opportunities for people to solve stuff individually, for people with different skill sets. Like I'm good at word puzzles, for example. I'm not great with like logic puzzles. So like there's a balance in there so that everybody gets a chance to at least do something.
Yeah. Why is it so attractive to you? Just because the things that you're making right now and have made in the past have a lot to do with cooperation, participation, teamwork, and what is it about that is so interesting for you to pick apart and design for?
I mean, when I was doing the alternate reality game stuff, and this is to maybe continue the conversation of how I got into the escape room design as well. I always found myself in a sort of community supporting role, like forum moderation or like helping make sure that the wiki was like adequately footnoted, making sure that new players then could like come in and get a grasp of like what was happening very quickly and get up to speed. So like I just was always like really interested in that because that's the experience that I would want to have as a newcomer. I eventually realized I could get paid to do like community management stuff.
Yeah.
So I went into that, doing work for games. And then eventually the sort of puzzle elements of that as well are, there's a lot of crossover. It's all community-based stuff. It's all like people hanging out with their friends to solve things. The escape room stuff itself came about just like as from my puzzle community. Like we all went and did one in Seattle, and on the drive back we were like, we could do that. We're video games and puzzle and theater people. Like we could totally like make this thing. Not knowing how difficult it would be.
Yeah.
Like that was what allowed us to actually do it.
Well, not to interrupt,
No.
but I'm gonna, because the Seattle puzzle community.
Yeah.
Like what does the Seattle puzzle community do in their meetups? Because this is interesting. Because I like the idea of people, designers and developers and things like that they have kind of a grassroots thing going. Like for example, puzzle community in Seattle. Can you tell me about that?
Totally. Every year there are what it's called a puzzle hunt, where it's not necessarily like super heavily narrative. It's usually focused on like very cleverly, elegantly designed puzzles that are really, really hard. And so sometimes it'll be like a day-long hunt, or sometimes it's a weekend-long one. But there's both the Microsoft Puzzle Hunt in Seattle and the MIT Mystery Hunt, obviously in Boston. But both of those have like national contingents of people who are like participating remotely. And there used to be a thing called Bay Area Night Games, which was the same sort of thing. Like you rent a van and you like drive all over the place to like solve these puzzles. There's a movie that sort of touches on that, and it's part of this like mythos of puzzle community history called Midnight Madness, and it's a terrible movie.
Okay, I'll have to make sure to watch this terrible movie then.
Yeah, but it's in the continuum of the game, the Michael Douglas thing too. So like, all of it has inspired all this other stuff.
Yeah, that's because. Oh, by the way, in chat, Pig Squad says, "Hey, Laura."
Oh yeah, hi. Yeah. That's the Portland Indie Game Squad.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
They're awesome.
The Pig Squad.
It's an awesome community resource if you're in Portland, Oregon, and looking to make games or meet people, or learn how to do stuff. Your sort of experience level doesn't matter. It's great.
Yeah. We've got a few more minutes here. I don't want us to totally spoil your GDC talk. Sure. But it does say here that you'll be discussing design fundamentals and structures necessary for creating real-world experiences. And we kind of touched on all kinds of aspects of that, but do you have some specific, what are the fundamentals that you expect to outline, or can you at least tease that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. This will be specifically as it relates to escape rooms, but the fundamentals of this are so like applicable to any kind of thing. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I try and encourage people to remember is like there's a huge difference between what you want somebody to do with your stuff and like what they're actually gonna do. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this in the play testing, in the breakability and the affordances. Like it's your job to give people only as much as they need, or to direct their attention, or whatever it is, to get them to do the behavior that they're going to do. But so often I see something where it's like, yeah, this is a cool idea, and I'm just gonna like slap it in there, without thinking like, oh, well, maybe this wouldn't make any sense to somebody who's not approaching it from our point of view. Like, it's always focused on people and what the people are doing with the thing. So like that is what should be informing all of your design choices.
Yeah. It just seems I'm just still kind of hung up on how difficult playtesting this it would be, because it's almost like, since it's physical and you have somebody, for example, pulling the typewriter ribbon out, say that happens during a playtest, and then you have to reset everything or take it out, or can you kind of describe a little bit of like the actual practical workflow, and when you find something that's wrong with the design? Is it just putting a post-it note on the typewriter saying "please don't touch," or or what?
I would never put a note in the room that's like "don't touch this" or "broken" unless it was actually part of the game, because to me, if I saw that, it would take me out of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually I'll put in like more stuff than is required, if I think that there's like wiggle room at all, and then I'll like remove stuff once I see how stuff's going. Like as an example, we had a prop trunk one time in one of these. We needed to lock it because people were going to like bang it into the wall a bunch. But then every single time people kept trying to open it. They wanted to unlock it. And eventually, it's not fun to waste your time on something or to feel like you've left this thing unsolved, because they don't know it's not actually a puzzle or a part of the game. So we actually just like rearranged it, opened it up, and like integrated it into a different puzzle in order to make it less of like a tension point.
Yeah. Interesting. So, Alex, how's it going over there in your little Bay Area utopia?
I'm still thinking about Shenmue. You brought that up earlier as something that you really enjoyed playing, or maybe enjoy is a strong word, but you were compelled to play through and fiddle with everything and explore every nook and cranny. Are there other examples of games that have sort of had that same effect on you? Like, because I know game designers might want to look at interesting examples of how to breathe life into a world by just filling it with interesting things to play with.
Sure. I mean, I have to shout out Myst, because like I wouldn't be here if I hadn't played that when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And actually Riven was the first time I'd ever seen an adult being excited about a video game, as I recall. So that actually for me was like very, very fundamental.
Did one of your parents play Myst too?
What's that?
Did one of your parents play Myst too?
No, it was like one of my parents' friends who was like super into it. Yeah, no, my parents have never quite understood this video game lark that I've been interested in.
Mine, same here.
Yeah, that and like text-based adventure games, MUDs and stuff. Oh my gosh. Actually, yeah. So I used to play multi-user dungeons, right? Like the text-based stuff. Those were so rich in their potential for letting you use your imagination to design the world. I would say like that was a very fundamental thing for me. But most games now, if there's like a large world, they're very carefully designed, and if you're paying attention to them, like everything is pretty much based on these same principles that we've been talking about. Like we've been poking around in Hitman 2 and stuff, and like that, there's lots and lots of little hidden details that someone has thought of. JP LeBreton actually has a list of mods and stuff for what's called game tourism, which is like either you can play like as a non-violent run, or it lets you in some way explore the game, or there's a mod available. So I've found that really interesting and useful for looking around stuff. Also, the San Andreas deer, that was a really interesting perspective for that game. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up MUDs. I maybe some people watching this may not remember or may not have cared, but like in the 90s, if you were playing PC games like and you were online, like a lot of people were playing Doom 2, Quake, maybe some Duke Nukem. But like when you went to MUDs and you would have this text interface that you would dial into, and then you could sort of walk your way. You know, it was all text commands, but you could go in places and like look at things and pick up things and like open drawers or chests and like root around inside or put things in there. And that level of like that high degree of fidelity was incredibly rare in games back then. It's still rare, I think, today, but it was kind of mind blowing.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things like your imagination filled in the rest of the details, you know?
Yeah. Well, we're about out of time, and you know, this is Laura E. Hall. Tons of interesting stuff to say over the past hour, and she is actually a speaker at the Game Developers Conference coming up in February. Holy crap, that's soon. And the name of her talk is Lessons from Escape Rooms, Designing for the Real World in VR. She's co-founder of 60 Minutes to Escape, and you should go check her out. So everyone, we're signing off. I'm Chris Graft, editor-in-chief of Gamasutra. We've got, what's your name again in the Bay Area?
This is Alex Waro, another editor at Gamasutra. Laura, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks,
Brian,
Laura.
thank you so much for helping us stream back there.
Thanks, chat. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Chad. Bye.